Echelon is brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte. Our guest in Upper Echelon this week, Anton Botha, is chairman of Vukile Property Fund, also non-executive director at Sanlam, as well as non-executive at the JSE and at African Rainbow Minerals. Anton, before we get into property and your board memberships, your career began all the way back in the 1980s at Gencor, a company familiar to many of our listeners. Take us through that start of your career and how the securities business and Genbel eventually separated from Gencor.
Thank you. Yeah, Gencor was, I'm a non-miner, although I come from mining, even grew up on a mine, etc. So I started there as an investment analyst and became the head of the investments in the middle of the 80s. Derek Keys, the then chairman of Gencor, decided that it's not a good thing to have us in Gencor managing Genbel, which was the biggest activity, but kept on doing the same thing, switched to Genbel, which was a long-listed company and an investment trust. When Gencor, we were sort of investing with Gencor, with the Gencor group. We were also investing the surplus funds of the Gencor group. So when Gencor broke up or unbundled in 1993, we went out with Engen, Sappi, and Melback to the Gencor shareholders, and we then started with an investment banking business on the side. By 95, that was too big. There was too much capital in it, so we listed GenSec separately, which was the investment banking business. The investment banking business was extremely successful at the time, became one of the top 40 companies in South Africa on the back of backing the IT industry. So for a bunch of miners, that was quite interesting. And by the 2000, Sanlam then acquired all of GenSec. And some of the activities are still going on in Sanlam today, the capital markets business, etc. But there wasn't a point in having two headquarters, one on top of another, and then to the businesses. So I then left the employment of GenSec at the time when we closed the head office. I was the chief executive. And I started my career as a non-executive director because I was already then living in the Cape. And I rejoined the Sanlam board in, I think, 2006. The others, the JSE, etc., Vukile, etc., precede the Sanlam appointment.
These four boards, and you are on the council of the University of Pretoria as well, your alma mater. In terms of accepting these, in terms of knowing that you are comfortable with serving on four boards versus perhaps 6 or 7 or 8, how difficult was it to get that balance right?
I only have skills or knowledge in basically investments, stroke finance, and mining. So that is what I try to work with. Secondly, boards have become very difficult. The board work and very onerous. So I cannot do more than what I'm doing. If somebody offers me another board position, I would either have to resign something, which I would most probably not do, or just decline the offer. Simply because it's difficult. You've got to keep your mind on all the boards. In the past, it was much easier. I remember that in the early 80s, I was alternate on certain boards for Mr. Ted Pavitt, the then chairman of Gencor, and he was on the board of 37 listed companies, which was doable at the time. But in today's world, that's totally different.
Lots of meetings, though.
I mean, you also have to serve on committees. And the reason that I serve on a couple of boards, I will not serve on 1 or 2 boards. I would, because what you learn at the one you can transfer and you understand the whole thing. So therefore I specialize in which committees I sit on. So at all boards I sit on the remuneration side, which is the worst committee from everybody always fights about that one, but it's also the most interesting committee. And then where they have investment committees, etc., like especially at the university, we have that, and then on some of the audit committees.
You mentioned earlier that you're a non-mining person in investments. You're also a non-property person.
Yes.
As chairman of a property fund. Why did you accept Vukile?
The property fund funds, the industry, are basically intermediaries between the actual property investments and the investors. It gives you liquidity. It's a worldwide industry called REITs, etc. So if you look at the balance sheet of a property company, I cannot claim to be an expert on the asset side of that. I know something after 8 years of what makes a good property. It's whether it's totally let to good tenants and not so much what it looks like. And on the but on the liability side, I understand all these property funds, by definition, have very large liabilities to the banking sector and other bond issuers, and of course to shareholders. There I am in an area that I'm very comfortable with, and that's about half the work you've got to do on that. So we have property people who I totally defer to on Vukile, but I have much more of an opinion on the liability side of that balance sheet.
The listed property sector as a whole has performed incredibly well over
Yes.
the past 3 or 4 years. At current levels, where that market is right now, are you still comfortable?
The listed property sector was always a very small sector because there wasn't a lot of liquidity needed, and the institutions had the properties on their own name. So the first reason why the listed property sector became very active is that the quality of the properties have increased tremendously by the institutions selling some of their properties to get liquidity into it. The second reason, of course, is that it is somewhere between an equity and a bond, and the yields on the bonds have gone down quite considerably, which of course pushes up your bond element of it. So your rating of property companies have gone up tremendously. So I don't think it is out of line with the current market. But if you get a quick and if you get a sharp rise in government bond interest rates, you cannot expect the property sector not to derate from that. The economy, I think, is not in such a wonderful position that the current vacancies, I think, is about as bad as it gets. Maybe it can get a little worse. But so I'm not too worried about the asset side of it. I'm more worried about what can happen to higher interest rates for the sector.
Overall, your reading of the economy, having been involved at Gencor in the 80s, obviously very close to investments and investing throughout the 90s into the 2000s and now into the 2010s. What is your reading of the South African economy and the South African market at the moment?
The 70s and the 80s was a very bad spot for all of us. The economy didn't grow. It wasn't good. From 94 onwards, we had the best economy in my career. The economy grew fast. We had capital inflows. We had relaxation of exchange controls, etc. So it was if I look at the longer period, it was a much, much better economy that one had to live, what we were privileged to live in for a bit. At the moment, we're going through a bad patch. The world affects us seriously, but and maybe I put too much emphasis on mining, but it is such an important thing in South Africa. The mining industry going through what it's going through at the moment is causing enormous trouble. The fact that the mines went on strike, the fact that the whole platinum industry is not profitable at the moment, means, for instance, that there's no tax being paid to government. The retrenchments on that industry and in agriculture because of the wages being driven too high is causing havoc with those people's lives, but also on the spending, which means that there's no VAT and that sort of thing. So we're going through a bad patch. We all go through bad patches in everything we do in life. We all learn from it and adapt. I think we're in the trough area of that problem. The rest of our economy, I'm not too concerned about. I don't think we're that uncompetitive. The uncompetitive parts like clothing manufacturing, textiles have all basically been closed down. There's a little bit of it left. But you cannot compete with somebody earning, $50 a month in China. So South Africans will never stand for it. So, that's gone. The mining and agriculture is at the moment in the hot spot, and we have to get it right, and I'm sure we will get it right as a country because the stakes is too high to not get it right.
Are those the two things that keep you awake at night?
those are the two that I think has the biggest challenges currently. And the good thing about it is that in a combined response from the industry and government and hopefully the unions, there is obviously a solution to the problem.
Your own career, you are non-executive on these 3 boards and chairman of Vukile. You also founded an investment company in Malivest in 2004 in Stellenbosch. What is the purpose of that?
Well, there are 6 of us who are owners of that little company, and basically we're actually a registered asset manager, and we have 2 unit trust, and that's why we have it. But we basically invest our own and our family money through that office. It gives us all infrastructure. We're all basically professional people that made, we're all around 60. So we look after our own affairs, both investment and, of course, administratively there.
I noticed you're quite active on LinkedIn.
I'm active on it. I am on it, but I don't know why you think I'm active. I always get these people say, link to me, and I link to them. I know a lot of just about everybody who I link to I've met before.
Anton, just to close off with a question I ask everybody here in the upper echelon, what motivates you?
Well, you need intellectual stimulation, and then I'm an investment person. I like to earn a higher return than the market. I mean, I'm an equity. I think about it in equity terms. Equities gives you 4 to 6% equity premium, and then on top of that, if you're a good value investor, over time you can earn another 3 to 4. Well, 2 to 4, says Eugene Farmer. And
that's fine. We'll just reshoot that. That's fine.
So I just want to end this.
Okay.
So trying to earn that extra return is the important thing that I'm trying to achieve with it.
In terms of equities, if you just look at the market right now, where are you seeing value?
The South African equity market, I think, because of our wonderful performance, is relatively expensive. The 2 areas which are looking relatively cheap, but are going through very volatile times and very unprofitable times, are the mining industry and construction. I think the mining industry will have to come right, as we've discussed before. I think we're closer to the bottom than to the top. And I think if you look at the government's very correct plans to spend a lot of money on infrastructure, you cannot do that unless you have these large construction companies in good shape. And they're not in good shape at the moment. So once they get through the current competition and all the other problems and tenders and whatever, once they get that right, there's going to be enormous potential for that industry. So those are the 2 areas I think are more attractive than the others. In the long term, I have no opinion on the short term because I can't. I found after the 30 years of trying to do timing, I've given up.
Anton Botha is chairman of Vukile Property Fund, also non-executive director of Sanlam, the JSE, and African Rainbow Minerals. An upper echelon was brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte.